put all this effort into generating this thing that then is never actually going to be the real thing that the person paying the bill cares about.
That data has to be accurate to begin with for that model to be held to a certain tolerance based on the type of project or accuracy you're shooting for.
Scan-to-BIM, more of a default methodology.
But the key is you got to know your contracts.
I think the industry has the same fixation on 2D design documents. All of this is intended to get us to a better building.
I don't want to just convert a paper document into a PDF.
Bullets before you shoot cannonballs, go test it out.
Things get hit because they're dug, because they weren't documented very well about where they are.
Differential discussions, talk with your project partners and see what they're needing.
We'll evolve the methodology using digital technology.
Always be open for new conversations.
It's mechanisms for better construction.
But we do need to start out with some quick introductions here. So, Josh.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Josh DeStefano. I work for DPR Construction. My background is in virtual design and construction and reality capture. I'm currently kind of serving both teams. I'm switching from the virtual design and construction team to innovation to sort of look more forward into how we use these technologies and how we scale them up at our company.
I am Lindsay Fox. I am the CEO and founder of TyraBuilt, which is a scan-to-BIM and BIM coordination for the residential construction market.
I'm Joshua Steinert. I'm with PB2 Architecture and Engineering. We're national and regional mercantile work. I am the senior manager of graphics and technology implementation. So that's me. I've been doing it for around 30-some years.
All righty, and I'm Kelly. I'm with ClearEdge 3D, and spent the first 10 years of my career at the Beck Group, basically doing VDC, running that department, started up a Scan-to-BIM team, and then when I had a second child and decided working 60 hours a week was not healthy, basically decided to try this software thing out for a while. Been there 5 years, so that is me. And everybody knows Matt, but Matt is also going to be participating today. Matt, do you want to say anything?
I'm here as a fill-in. We had one of our panelists have to drop, so I want to just help facilitate, maybe ask some questions. But overall, being Nexus, we do a lot of scanning, a lot of modeling, and trying to help figure out how these all come together. So just want to be a part of it, and thank you.
All righty. Well, let's get this Scan-to-BIM University Scan-to-BIM panel going then. Excellent. I actually want to do a quick poll of hands from the audience. So I would like to first kind of get a sense of your level of expertise with scanning, Scan-to-BIM, kind of this space. So if you'd say that you're a novice, please raise your hand. Got a couple, all right.
Go novices.
Yeah, it's a good choice being here. Excellent. If you think you're kind of in the middle of the pack, you've been doing it a while, but you're still got a lot to learn. Where you get some hands, all right.
Fantastic. We should all raise our hands.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah, I was gonna say. And then, all right, experts.
Yeah, that's some confidence.
Boom. All right. Fantastic. So we're kind of right in the middle of the pack. It seems like is the largest group here. That's awesome. And I'd also like to do a quick show of hands for industry stuff. So if you're on the design side, so architect, design engineer, please raise your hands. Got a couple. All right. Fantastic. If you're on the construction side, so GC, subcontractor. All right, we got kind of a pretty even mix there. Fantastic. Owner, operator, real estate, kind of anything else. Okay, fantastic. All right. That helps us because as we kind of think about questions and where to target those questions, we can hopefully do a better job. So let's kick off for our kind of middle of the pack here. I'm super curious because I want to hear what is the top thing that you three would actually advise our audience knowing what you know, having been in it as long as you have been in it, I want to know what is the top bit of advice that you would give to people that are kind of trying to take their game to the next level.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad you're here. I would say the first bit of advice was go to things like this, because we, as an industry, are not in a space where we're really competing against each other. We're at a space where we're competing with analog systems. So by all of these professionals gathering, owners gathering to discuss, like, what are we doing? Are we digitizing construction, or are we digitalizing? And there is a distinction. Are we just converting from a physical asset or a physical method into digital? Or are we actually trying to evolve the methodology using digital technology? And that's really where we are. So the fact that we're all here discussing, like, how do we do that better is how we are actually going to go out into the market and make Scan-to-BIM more of a default methodology. And then we can have a free-for-all, like, in the friendly competition space.
All right. Josh, you got something?
Yeah, I do. So, you know, there's obviously folks that are in different stages of their journey with reality capture. I think the thing that I would have liked to put more thought into when we were first getting into it was a little bit more forward thinking, the life cycle of the equipment, for example. We ended up buying a lot of equipment, not really thinking about what we would do at the end of its life. And, you know, we still use a lot of it, but we weren't thinking too much in terms of how the technology is changing and upgrades and different things like that. We didn't really think, you know, very much ahead of that when we first got into it. I sort of have two. I would say the other one is shoot bullets before you shoot cannonballs. Go test it out and learn what you can use it for and what your teams can get value out of it before you jump into the deep end, kind of thing.
I've heard that weapon analogies go over very well in Idaho because they have a lot of gun stores. So I'm from Texas, so they work there too. Joshua.
I have two also. One is differential discussions. I mean, talk with your project partners and see what they're needing. And then what you have in technology that you know or that you're learning, you know, connect with service providers, whatever it is, and then figure out which one of you is going to have the efficient and successful project to make it work. So always be open for new conversations. And the other one that I think I wish I would have taken to heart more would just move forward with, like, common caution. You know, we hear that a lot today, but a lot of this big data, a lot of the new technology can be really overwhelming, but there's kind of simple ways to just move forward slowly.
All righty. Lindsay, do you want to get another one in since everybody else took two?
Does anyone know how to test whether or not your scanner is defective? That's a huge step. And then when you're saying, like, you know, shoot bullets, not cannonballs, when you get your scanner out of the box, first step, let's make sure it's not defective. And, like, what are those methodology, and, like, who's putting that information out there for you to say, like, well, let's assess the hardware and make sure that it's working. And the other piece is don't just assess the hardware, because it doesn't matter if the hardware is collecting accurate data or precise data if you can't get it out, if you can't share it. Like, what is the after scan process look like, and how universal accessibility, like, how accessible is that information that you've gathered?
Matt.
Yeah, I think my piece would probably go along with some of the previous conversation about accuracies. I think the effort put in to get the data is also going to be how accurate can the deliverable be that's going to be extracted from that data. So whether we're drafting from data or creating BIM models from scan data, that data has to be accurate to begin with for that model to be held to a certain tolerance based on the type of project or accuracy you're shooting for. So I would say, and again, even when we first got into scanning, not fully understanding that process, we hit things up and down, and we did some projects the wrong way, learned the hard way. So I think if I was to go back and say, what's a piece of advice, it would be that. It would be making sure we understood the process of capturing things properly so that that data is at a certain accuracy we need for certain projects before even moving to extraction and deliverable.
Yeah. And I think the thing that always struck me as a bit odd about reality capture is that it's never actually the product itself, right? Nobody really wants a laser scan. Nobody really wants the stuff that we generate ourselves. And like, what was that? There was that company that for a long time, their little commercial that they'd put up, it'd be like BASF or something. We don't make the products you use, we make the products you use better, or something like that, right? That's kind of what we do, right? We're doing this thing, and we put all this effort into generating this thing that then is never actually going to be the real thing that the person paying the bill cares about. Right? They don't care about the point cloud. They care about what gets done from the point cloud. And so I think that was one of those things that took me a while to realize, because I was always thinking about how do I deliver the best point cloud? And then, I wasn't getting paid very much for delivering the best point cloud. And then when I realized, oh, they don't care about the point cloud, they care about this. And then I tried to deliver the best that. Then all of a sudden, I didn't have trouble getting paid for those things, right? Because it was like, oh, that's what they want. Okay.
I think the industry has the same fixation on 2D design documents.
Yeah.
That all of this is intended to get us to a better building and to try to, reduce rework or eliminate rework. So it's mechanisms for better construction. And I think folks are realizing sort of the same thing with 2D. It doesn't have all the information. We have, more data in the models. Let's use that.
If only the lawyers would let us.
Yeah, that's going along with moving from digitization to digitalization. Like, I don't want to just convert a paper document into a PDF. I want my deliverable to be more complete. I want to change the process behind that. And I think everyone in this room can recognize that if you're sitting in this room and you're functioning at 60% of your potential, you are still going to outperform 90% or more of your competitors simply because you are in a mindset of, I'm going to change the process in my workflow so that the product is better. I'm not in this business to create paper plans. I'm in this business to create a better building.
Well, I've got a different question I want to ask then. One of the other challenges that I've found is pretty common is finding good resources to help you get started, to help you get up that next hill, to help you make a good RFP, if you're an owner, or to have a good response to one if you're a provider. So I don't know, what resources have you guys found that have been super critical to help you get Scan-to-BIM done?
Our laser scanning is 100% in-house. So we do it on projects that we're getting anyway, that we had used other methods to audit those locations before.
I'm the same way. I'm not outsourcing it.
So I think Kelly's trying to set me up for a softball here to talk about the U.S. Institute of Building Documentation. Thank you for that. So we both are involved in this organization, and the things that Kelly just described is essentially some of the goals and objectives of the USIBD. They're trying to create standards. So we've talked a lot about accuracy, and what I'm realizing, I have realized, and realizing more talking to folks at this conference, is that there's just not a lot of awareness that these standards exist. And I think they're really good. We're on the third version of it. There's a certification, just like you can get, CM-BIM from AGC. You can get a certification from the USIBD that the LOA. But there's not a lot of awareness around it. So we're trying to raise awareness, talk about it in forums like this. But I can tell you a little bit about it. And we've talked about accuracy, and essentially what the LOA does is it breaks down level of accuracy in the same way or similar way that LOD breaks down a model. Kind of gives you descriptions of what would be included. In this case, it's a range of it's accurate within a couple inches or a quarter inch or whatever. And then there's tiers to that. So you can start to have some terminology and some nomenclature around This is, I'm giving you a point cloud that's an LOA 30 or an LOA 40, and there's, reference to go back and look at what that tolerance or how accurate you're saying that is. And there's actually two ways to look at it. You can look at the measurement accuracy, how accurate is what I'm measuring and sort of the point cloud compared to the real world. And then there's also Scan-to-BIM, where we're taking that information and creating a digital geometric representation of that, and how accurate is that to the real thing. In the same way that the survey folks talked about compounding error, you're going to have sort of compounding tolerances, because I'm not going to get any tighter tolerances in my model than I am in my point cloud, in my data, right? So, and typically we're taking, you talked about it with Edgewise, where you're taking, a pipe that has some, snaking to it and representing it as a straight pipe. So we're taking that highly accurate point cloud data and now representing it in a model for coordination or whatever, but there is a way to say how accurate you're saying that is. And we're starting to see some owners and different jurisdictions create their own standards around this stuff, and we can talk about this a little bit too. But there is a resource, and the things that Kelly talked about, the RFP, understanding service providers, and really similar to what RCN is doing, trying to create a community around building development and or building documentation rather, and the surveyors and everybody that's doing this work to have, a place to go for a standard and for, particular documents like an RFP.
Awesome. Matt, do you have anything you want to shout out aside from
No,
or including?
I appreciate you guys bringing that up. It's something that I haven't even fully dove into USIBD. I know it exists, and I think there's similar goals. Are both sides. It's like, how do we bring the community together, the technologies together, and create processes so that things are captured properly? We know the accuracy levels, what technologies. So, no, I appreciate you bringing it up, and I totally agree.
Yeah, there's another aspect of it too, is that we need, and you talked about this with the manufacturers, like we need to influence the manufacturers and the software developers to give us what we want, right? And so coming together as a building documentation community and folks that use this technology and saying, we really need XYZ, is
It's a free-for-all
impactful.
out there.
Yeah.
Like even in your component content, you've got manufacturers that are getting all excited about their BIM libraries and how they're accessible to designers, and drop that into a model and your model size explodes and it just makes it impossible to use. And then, I'm thinking perfect is the enemy of done. Like, it's important that this forum is thinking about what these standards are, but I feel like until this method of delivery is more standard, those competing factors aren't really going to translate out to like the common consumer market. So we actually have to get this method into the default method of delivery for construction. And that's why, not competing with each other right now, it's like we just don't have that luxury yet.
Yeah.
Like we have to just start. I'm sitting listening to what is a digital twin? I know exactly what a digital twin is because I'm in my own brain. In my head, a digital twin is the bi-directional flow of information between the model and the physical asset throughout the life cycle of that physical asset. So let's look at the other side of construction and say, let's imagine that every building in the world has a digital replica, and the information from that building is flowing to that model, and that model is constantly getting updated. It's used for the maintenance crew and phasing of construction and renovation improvements. It's managing security. It's helping with fire suppression. It's doing more, and the model then becomes more valuable to the common consumer and the end user, because it's just you're incorporating the entire user experience of that building, not just the construction crew that has to put it together.
Can I add I don't think anybody wants to create inaccuracies. So, the converse to all the discussions of accuracies, but the key is you got to know your contracts. Just like in an RFP, I don't want to put something out there that I'm going to lose money on or that I'm going to do wrong. Just so even in my deliverables, I mean, if I'm giving something as a deliverable, I need to know what that deliverable is, especially with the accuracies and the methods that I take to get there.
And that's where I'd really like to see every hardware provider that's sitting in this room to really provide resources to the professionals on the other side of it and really start thinking about their user experience. Is my processing software user-friendly? Is it easy to learn? Are there standards, not just here's a bunch of tools that we created in this software processing, what's the best way to use those tools? You know, and that's very project specific, but it all starts with a conversation. I'm doing this with my CloudPoint data. I'm bringing my CloudPoint data into this platform. What's my resource? Where is the standards around that, you know, processing after the fact?
Awesome. I will also give a shout out to the laser scanning forums. If you're not on the laser scanning forum, you should be on the laser scanning forum. Great,
Valuable information.
great questions, great answers. It's another community, and you know, since I was trying to lob up a softball for myself with the Scan-to-BIM University thing,
We're gonna make it more. We're gonna do more.
very
I feel
unsuccessfully.
like there's a lot of people that are out there like just thirsty for this knowledge, and like, you know, I work with analog architectural firms who are never going to just deviate from their current methods of documenting and structuring and say, like, you don't have to deviate. I don't want you to deviate. You go do what you do in your core competency. I'll stay in mine, and let's make sure that we're working together to create a great building for our clients. That's the point.
Absolutely. And so if you haven't checked out any of the Scan-to-BIM University things, there's a LinkedIn group for it, and then there's some great webinars. It's scan-to-bimuniversity.com. It's really, really easy to remember. You know, Matt helped us launch that, and I think we're going to be doing more stuff this year to kind of continue those panels, get more technical stuff. And so actually, if anybody here is interested in being part of that as a faculty member, please track me down upstairs at the ClearEdge booth, and you know, let's chat, because we want to get more content on there, and so it's really important to share. All right, I still think we do have a question. Oh, excellent. All right.
I'll second the value of the Scan-to-BIM University. It's the first place I point all my students to. So the question, you mentioned before that it's not about creating high quality point clouds, it's about giving your customer their thing. And so I was wondering, could you maybe tell a story about a client that maybe didn't know what their thing was? They just had like a generic LOD policy, told you to model everything, and how you kind of helped them find out what their thing was?
I'm sure all of us have at least a couple stories about something to that effect. I will tell you, I saw the funniest Scan-to-BIM model I have ever seen. Last week, I was chatting with a buddy online, and he pulled up a project where somebody had written a script that basically tried to convert it to walls by looking for lines in it, but every little stretch of point cloud that looked linear ended up having a little wall that was about a quarter of an inch thick. And so there were literally thousands and thousands and thousands of walls, and that was like they were going to do. That was going to be their Scan-to-BIM. It's like an adaptation of something they did for CAD, which is equally terrifying. But yeah, that was pretty funny because they were like, "Oh, I guess we need help." It's like, yeah, you need help.
I'm in the residential space, so my clients literally don't even know what to ask for. They don't know, like, and that's where, I mean, I'm the first one out there that's hoping that owners can become more aware of what tools are being used in the industry. I think it's underestimated there's so much digital in the world that a lot of people just assume that there is a level of digitalization in construction when there's not. It's not there. And there's a default thinking, if I hire an architect, they're going to be, of course, a floor plan is just a slice through a 3D model. That's where I live. That's where my clients are thinking their two-dimensional drawings are coming from. They think it's a slice out of a model. And I have to say, no, that is a drawing of what they think that floor looks like. That is an elevation or section of what they think that building looks like. Now here, let me show you when I did this scan, it doesn't look anything like the architect drew it because they didn't put the effort into making sure that they documented the whole 3D structure.
Right, we're designing based off assumptions and not actual
Or
information.
imaginations. And I
Yeah.
feel like that kills me because I'm like, if your entire project team is looking at two-dimensional documents, imagining what a 3D space is looking like, you have no confirmation that everybody on that team is imagining this space exactly the same, which is going to cause inefficiencies and conflicts.
Yeah, spatial reasoning, I mean, if I leave it up to 2D elevations, orthographic elevations, and floor plans, somebody else's translation is going to be a lot different. But to answer the question on what clients don't know, with laser scanning, we've experienced that many times on our projects, we have to know like a scope of work before we would start. And now that we're scanning everything, we're able to revisit and make changes throughout that project lifecycle afterwards that the client didn't know, that we were able to then give them measurable information that's reduced revisits, it's shortened the time frame to make changes. So that's something the client really wasn't that aware of.
I had a client ask me to save the trees in my point cloud, and I'm like, oh, really? But they wanted sun studies. They wanted to know, like, the landscape architect wanted to know what the shade was going to be and the type of plants to specify. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's all there. I'm going to take it out for now, but if you ever want it, I got it. And that was just sort of like the aha moment. I've got another client that has 5 houses in a plot, and I've already done a scan of the exterior, and I've got, like 40% of half our other properties. I'm like, well, here's a batch price, let's get them all.
And there's a lot of times we would go get measurements off Google Maps or something, but the fact that I have some scan data that in many ways is more accurate from
Cross-check
different
it.
vantage points, I'm glad to not know what the customer's going to ask us if the scan data had, especially because a lot of times we have it.
Yeah, so to speak a little bit to the question and what Kelly talked about with not wanting, a perfect point cloud, that might be a little bit of an oversimplification in a way. I think it's understanding like we talked about, what the team needs to get out of it. So even internally, we've had challenges where, we give folks a point cloud and they don't know what to do with it. Or, they're not quite sure how to navigate it or whatever. So we've tried to take it to the next step and we want a good point cloud because of the things that we're going to do downstream with it. But the teams want, and a lot of the clients want, whatever that deliverable is. They don't care about sort of where it came
How you got
from.
there.
Means and
Yeah,
methods.
and I think we need to shift that mindset a little bit, and I think it will after they start realizing, well, just like with a model where you have three-dimensional information and now you can create drawings by taking views of that and have them all linked together, folks are going to start to understand, well, these deliverables that you analyze this with has a whole bunch of other data, right? So a good example of this is a number of years ago, 2015, 2016, we're a self-performed general contractor. So we do doors, frames, and hardware. We do framing and drywall. We do concrete. And the 2 primary ones are drywall and concrete. And we were looking for ways to leverage laser scanning. I'm actually going to talk about this a lot later. But we were looking for ways to leverage scanning, and quality control was one of those. And Kelly talked about the dipstick and rhythm and how that can all be done in software now. And that's essentially what we brought in and adopted. But there was a lot of additional benefit from that. So the goal was to replace the dipstick method of the floor flatness and be able to do it in-house. And sort of that helped us justify the cost of the scanner, bringing the scanner on and having it used. But what we started to realize is that not only what Kelly mentioned, that you can start to do this upstream, you can start to scan concrete when it's still workable, but you can also get a lot more information out of your analysis. So now, instead of just giving you a floor flatness number, a floor levelness number that a lot of people don't understand quite where those numbers come from and what to do about them, now we can add in, okay, well, here's your FF and FL, but here's a heat map that shows you what that slab is doing, and here's contours that give you actual numbers, and we can do 1/8-inch contours in some cases if we have a really accurate scan. And a lot of times you're really going for the FF and FL, but then you need to know what this lab is doing in the rest of it, because the FF and FL only looks at, you know, certain lines here and there to get an overall idea of it. So there's an understanding or a thing that we need to understand, that there's a lot more that we can get out of it because we're doing scanning and replacing some of these other methods.
Absolutely. I think one of my favorite examples was having a customer specify the capture method. So we had a customer that didn't want to tell us what they wanted to do with the data, but they told us they wanted to come out and capture this data. They told us how they wanted us to capture it. So we're like, okay, you're paying us money, I guess we'll do what you say. And so we went out and collected the data exactly as specified. And then we got a call like 3 months later because they were really upset because the data wasn't on control, which they did not specify or ask for. The data was not at the accuracy they had decided after the fact that they needed, because they decided they wanted to do some fabrication stuff off of it, and they never told us that. They told us the spec they gave us was, I think, plus or minus an inch. And they told us to use a mobile scanner. And so we went out and did a mobile scan, and then they wanted to use that with, 16th inch accuracy for fabrication. And it's like, oh,
I know,
you can,
don't do that. Don't let your, I mean, we talk about like going to the owners and owner specified standards, and I'm like, well, that works to a degree. However, you're the professional in the industry.
Yeah.
So you're the one that needs to like decide which tools are going to best execute where you are in your core competency, and not let owners specify. I don't scan because an owner told me to scan. I don't scan because an architect told me to scan. I scan because it's the best method to achieve the product that I need to put out there as a professional. That's my job.
So then, like in that example where you mobile scanned it, did you go back and rescan the project?
they paid someone else to go back and
So-
rescan it because
Yeah, like, I'm
So
not,
that's
like,
good for the business.
they were angry at me.
if I had someone to say, I need to build a house, I just need some lines on paper. I'm like, I don't do that.
Yeah.
Go find the guy. I know some guys that do some lines on paper, but good luck. And they're like, well, wait, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, I'm 3D, I'm going to a level of detail to actually get you to a successful construction project. They're like, oh, I want to hear more.
Yeah. All right, we've got another question.
So yesterday we had I'm going to back up a little bit, or not talk as loud. So yesterday we had a discussion as technology providers about where we see the industry going and where we want the industry to go. From your perspective, what are the top two things that we as an industry provider could do to improve for example, the UI that you mentioned? And where do you see the industry, or where would you like to see it go?
I'd like to see our sensors have some good quality indoor positioning ability, so that I don't have to weigh the question, do I need to get a total station in there? Do I need to know if there's, and I know the difficulty in that technology. VR is doing pretty good with indoor positioning, but can the scanners capitalize on some of that technology?
I would like to see hardware suppliers get some user feedback and say, where can we improve our software experience for our end user? And that's really where you're going to drive. I think when you get into scanning and you try and make it more cost effective for smaller firms to incorporate scanning into their workflow, you also have to think about how many hours they're putting into learning the software, learning the best methods to get to the deliverables that are usable for their workflow, and having those panels pull in and actually study, I can't stand this particular function of the software. This is where we need to fix this. And get that, dialogue between the user and the developer.
Yeah, so there's two parts to that question, right? What's the trend, and what can the manufacturers do? The trend that I'm seeing is so I've been in the BIM side of things for like 14 years, and I saw a similar trend that I'm seeing now in reality capture back then, and that was the industry started using technology to improve its processes, and then owners started to get educated on it, and then started to say, this is what we want. In a lot of cases, just like Kelly mentioned, they would ask for things that in some cases they don't quite understand, or they're asking for a lot more than they really need, and they're not aligning with their needs with what actually needs to happen, especially like very high upstream. But so it sort of had to pull back a little bit and get folks to understand, like, you can't specify a level of development 450. You can't just make stuff up. And think that that's going to cost less than a 500, right? So there's things like that I think that are happening right now. I'm starting to see some jurisdictions, some entities starting to create their own standards. And what I think that we're a little bit in danger of is asking for more than we really need in the same way that we did with BIM. And not understanding what we're asking for the actual use cases that we're going to take that data and leverage it. And there's also a misunderstanding of like the costs that are involved and, you know, all this kind of stuff. Folks think they can just, you know, well, I can just go buy that scanner myself and do what you're doing, right?
I've gotten
Not
that too.
necessarily.
I'm
So-
like, yeah, if you don't have a day job.
Yeah, so I think a lot of what the manufacturers could do would be to help folks understand kind of the spectrum. We talk a lot about the best tools for the job, what are the best tools for the job, and picking the right tool for the job. And when you first come into this space, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in the room that are new to this that are going, well, which one's going to be good for what I do? And if you start looking at specifications, we talk about this a lot in the USIBD. If you start looking at accuracy specifications and, you know, tolerances and different things like that, everybody's talking in completely different languages. Some folks are looking at, well, this is 1% accurate, and someone else is saying, well, this is plus or minus a couple millimeters, and someone else is saying,
What's your
well,
relativity?
this is, yeah, and so it's like, if you're somebody who is not studying this thing 24/7 like Kelly does, then you may not know what the differences are. And so how do you come into the space understanding, you know, whether or not to use a mobile scanner or to, you know, go crazy with putting a Faro on Spot Dog? So I think that's a big part of it, is that we feel like we're struggling, but I would also say that there's a lot of progress happening as well. And just, you know, we've dispersed, and there's different things going off in different directions, but we need to understand how to compare those and what to use it for.
Awesome. Got another, oh, excellent. All right.
As a person who posts a lot about laser scanning and drone data collection and all of that, there's a phenomenon about the outsourced international BIM modelers that then call and track you down. What's your opinion about outsourced modelers and the pros and cons?
Oh man, I'll tell you.
I call myself a recovering perfectionist, but I'm not. I'm not actually recovering. I'm going to stay here. So there's no way in hell I'm going to take anything and outsource it. But I am in this space where I have that luxury to do that. The point of my entry into the market was rather unconventional. I was an owner. I built a house. It was 2D documents. It was, I mean, the amount of information that wasn't in my construction documents was shocking, and I just didn't know it. And the fact that my entire project team was imagining my space differently, and I had no selections made because I couldn't make any selections because I didn't have any rendering tools that would visualize. I didn't know what rendering tools would be. The idea of being able to outsource a BIM creation is just not something that I would want to do. Because I want to take that ownership and I want to see it. We will take, you know, from the conceptual idea all the way to the end of construction. That's where I live, and it's about creating a little ecosystem where we can test out all of these incredible tools, resources, approaches, and methodologies in a really great test case and say, like, you guys have all done an incredible job in the commercial and public work space with driving reality capture, driving BIM processes, but you guys are operating in huge complex systems, layers of entities, not individual people. And so I get the benefit of seeing, well, what does this really feel like if I have a direct line to the owner, direct line to the trades, direct line to, engineers, and really test out how integrated everything can be.
So you were asking about outsourcing, right? So we're kind of in a unique position. We actually started a company in India to support several parts of our business. And what I've learned over the last couple of years, I was sort of on the other side of the fence. I was a little bit of a detractor to this idea because it's challenging. You have folks that are on the other side that many times we have this perception that they don't know what we're doing, or they don't know how to build, and it's really a cultural challenge. I've been to India twice now, and what I came to learn is that there's the people that we're working with are insanely intelligent. They're very intelligent. They build things differently. They do things differently. Their frame of reference needs to be sort of changed a little bit to understand how we do stuff here and understand exactly how we want things done. I kind of come to the other side, and I think that it can really work in some instances. A lot of things that we do are somewhat repetitive, but there's also some critical thinking that has to come in there in terms of like making decisions, and that's sort of where we're trying to leverage sort of a team approach where we figure out what the teams are good at, and timing and different things like that. Part of what we're trying to do is take advantage of the time zones, right? If I can, we've done this. If we can scan something, the team over there helps us out with VDC, reality capture. They do a whole bunch of different stuff with accounting and posting RFIs and all kinds of stuff that PEs typically do. But they also do registration for us. They put deliverables together for us. And so we've had times where we've had a tight time frame. Like say we have pre-pour concrete deck scanning, and we're trying to get a deliverable by the next day, right? A lot of times that's a tight time frame. We've got pours happening every week. We've got an inspection happening on Wednesday. We've got like buttoning up and double checking everything on Thursday, and then Friday we're pouring. So between Friday when everything is ready and 5 o'clock in the morning when the first truck shows up, we need to know our penetrations, our embeds, our openings, is everything in the right place?
And so the only way to do that is to take advantage of the time zones.
Or have someone stay up all night.
Right, and then that's another thing that came up in a conversation. So I'm part of Women in BIM, and we've had this discussion about the fact that you've gone to India and you have a connection with the people that are working on your projects over there and looking at the working conditions. I would say that's like my big scenario, is if you're going to outsource, take the time and really find out if it's an upskilling situation where it's upward mobility, they're in good working conditions, it's not like the sweatshop of BIM, so that you're actually expanding the workforce that's available to the industry in a responsible way. That's would be my number one.
Yeah, and I think we use service bureaus in many facets of our project process, and we do that as a clutch normally, since we do most of it internally. And so the hope to somebody that does Scan-to-BIM as an offering or as a service bureau for us, the hope in that relationship is that when we needed you, you did really good, and so then we would want to grow that relationship. Again, it's all just based on how much more can we use you, and if we have success stories from that.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you for the question.
I think the one thing that I would add to all that is that when it comes to outsourcing, that's not something that you can just do as a pot shot. It's not something you can do once. People think that outsourcing BIM is different than any of the other outsourcing that we do. And it's like, would you just pick an engineer out of the phone book that you've never worked with before and have them design a multi-million-dollar, building for you?
Yeah.
No, that's crazy, right? Same thing goes for outsourcing your modeling, right? You want to know the person, you want to know their history, their track record. It's not something that you should just do lightly.
Incorporate them in your team. It's not just
Yeah.
like a
And
one-off.
we even had, with some of our service bureaus, it took 3 or 4 tries.
Yeah.
But we, that built to a strong relationship.
Exactly. All right, we got another question though, it looks like.
A couple questions, if you don't mind. I haven't heard anybody talk about point cloud ownership. And when I was in industry, before I moved over to the software side, we were actually making a lot of money on data mining from our point clouds.
Interesting.
I think you should own your data. That's our company perspective. And then you should get paid for your deliverables. And if that's data, then you got paid for it.
Who told me to get a Matterport? Anybody? Yeah, someone told me, why don't you just get a Matterport? I don't own my data. That's why I don't have a Matterport. That's just, I feel like number one is when it's living out there and you don't have control of it, then you're losing something important.
Yeah, I think it's something that we need to address just in a similar context. We talk about models being contract documents and that's all over the board right now. And in the same way that like an architect or rather an owner might think that, they own the model, and an architect will say, well, you're paying me for the 2D documents, right? You're paying me for the deliverables. And, there was a lot of resistance to share models because that, there might be some IP in there. Or they just, they don't want to show you how much they screwed up.
What their template
sometimes.
is? Oh, I thought they're great.
Yeah,
You don't think of a parent as having, 2 different parents as having twins. So the owner really should own their data.
They certainly get a
if it's a
copy.
digital twin, then they
Yeah.
probably should own
I
it.
consider it IP, but I don't consider it exclusive.
Yeah, I have, it's a weird thing because they own the facility, right? So like the data is their facility. They don't really have any use for it outside of their project and doing things for them. But at the same time, it's like, well, if I give them all of the data, then they might be able to do a bunch of stuff that maybe they would have paid me to do. So it's kind of a double-edged, it's kind of a tricky situation. Typically, we will talk about the deliverables and determine whether or not we're providing a point cloud, and is that part of the deliverable package, or is it more focused on the results of an analysis and a PDF? So it really, for us, it kind of depends on the situation.
Yeah, so when I was at Beck, we had it in our contract that we owned the data and that we gave the client an unlimited single-use license for it, basically. So they also had the data and they could do whatever they needed to do within the context of that one building with that data, which is very much based on the AIA contract language for drawings. We basically copied and pasted the same language. But we put that out there because, we wanted to have that data. We wanted to be able to reuse it. And so, but there's plenty of contract mechanisms that, I think can bridge this gap fairly and give you ownership while also, giving the client,
I think it's an important question to ask, because if an owner wants to have a access or a copy of that file, it's part of when I'm creating the cloud point. Is there something that you're going to do with it after the fact when I'm no longer part of this project, because that could inform like some different methodology. For example, the trees, like I don't typically leave the trees in, but this owner wanted a point cloud with the trees so that, he could go do sun studies on I'm like, okay, well, you're going to hire me again because there's nobody in my space helping you. So that's great. But at the same, it can feed into what you're actually doing in your scan setups.
And that's where those wonderful AIA clauses can come in handy, because you can have certified uses. And I think that is an important thing to protect ourselves, because that story I mentioned earlier where I did a mobile scan at the client's request and then they wanted to do something else with it.
Yeah.
That was not one of the, so we put down as a certified use in our contract what they could use it for, and we just had to guess because they were being very weird and didn't want to tell us. And so
go hire someone else.
we put down like 30 things that we thought, oh, you could do that with mobile data. So we put down everything we could think of they should do with the data we provided. And then when it came down to it and they were yelling at me about this and I want to do that, I was like, well, that's not one of the certified uses. It's mobile data. Tough. Pay me more money. I'll scan it with a terrestrial scanner and you can go do that. But
Did we answer your question successfully?
Yeah, absolutely. I did have one more quick one, and I'm sorry. I come from transportation, and we know that, the stuff that we deal with, you can't scan. It's all underground. Why are we not putting in our contracts that as-built get scanned? Because as you're putting it into the ground, now you know exactly where it's at. We saw in the Wrigley example that, the model was wrong, the as-builts were, we know as-builts are wrong. We can hang our hat on that. And so why are we not taking advantage of the fact that all we have to do is fly that drone down the street and we know exactly where the sewer, the water, the communication lines are when the ground's open? Are we pushing in that market as a team here, or are you hearing
Let's do
that
it.
need?
I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, I
Let's
think
go.
they end up burying,
No more
they end up
vertical.
burying those lines pretty quick. So I mean, coordinating with your contractors is going to be a challenge to be able to get that scanned.
I mean, it's kind of a cultural thing. Our industry didn't have the technology to do good as-builts. And so we've got, hundreds of years of history in the industry where basically, close enough is good enough and you don't worry about it. And we now finally kind of have the computational power. We have tools like laser scanners that are sufficient to do this. I mean, hey, I make a software product that does this. It's called Verity. Come check it out. It's wonderful. But trying to get that cultural change is really hard because everybody's tight on fees. They don't have it structured into projects to actually do this. And so who's going to do that work? And it's
Well, that's
really
why
tough.
the professionals just have to start doing it as their own best practice and not necessarily wait for an owner to build in the fees. I would say my biggest piece is when you're marketing out there, you really got to tap into inefficiencies in the market and carve out your fee. So you can use the statistic that 30% of capital invested into a construction project is wasted. So if you're listening to the James Franco from Ervisto with the $4 million project, and that's a small project, and you've got 30% of that capital is wasted in inefficiencies, what are you going to do with $1.2 million to make sure as professionals that you're providing a product that is really going to make the change and improve the construction process? And really honing in and having those opportunities to have that conversation, you're gonna win. And being able to just drive your value, I could say I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on projects simply because I've done a scan and shown the architect, don't buy that entire kitchen package because you don't have the plate height to fit the $10,000 Sub-Zero refrigerator. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah. Matt, any last things to close us out?
I know we do have two questions. Maybe we can hit them quick. But I just wanted to say that question about capturing the piping is a good example of the fact that there's a lot of applications that we are not hitting consistently. We are this much into the market and adoption and implementation and requests for scanning. So part of the question about where's the future going to be, there is going to be a lot of scanning.
Yeah, what's on the other side of this? Because what is digital twin? It's
Yep.
two-way flow. Like the piping underground, we can monitor it now, right?
And one thing I want to throw out about underground specifically is we've done oil and gas facilities. We've seen accidents, utilities, right? Things get hit because they're dug, because they weren't documented very well about where they are. So it is going to be a huge topic of making sure. And people now, they'll go find them GPR. They got to dig them up. They got to find them. But those people are starting to ask those questions as they learn about these technologies of, how can we move forward, start implementing that and capture it? So really, it's the people that have those types of projects, as they get educated about these technologies on how they can be used, then we can implement them.
So I'll just add that those things that you talked about, scanning underground with control, capturing as-built, those are happening. But right now it's happening on the ginormous projects, right? So that's sort of what I was talking about trying to extrapolate the trend. We're seeing these things, these additional use cases, completely agree that we're just tip of the iceberg with what we can do here. But now we're starting to see this as a requirement. So my quick answer is resources and requirements. It's not a requirement, it's not part of the contract, and we're not going to spend the resources just to do something in addition all the time. necessarily, but those big projects are saying, yes, we understand that this is the best way to as-built, and I really care about how I'm going to manage this facility and what I'm going to do with it later, and I want to know what's where.
All right, I'm going to try and make it an easy question. As the professionals who are using the technologies and using the software, who do you think is responsible for being the biggest driver of that implementation and the biggest driver of the consumables that we are capable of delivering? And what do you see as being the driver of enriching those technologies and moving them forward?
I think we as professionals are the drivers.
The people in this room.
Yeah, we're set the standards. You have to project out. You have to be able to communicate what you're doing differently. And I think that's where this room could improve, and why, like Matt and I kind of geek out, or Kelly and I geek out, is that we need to be able to communicate what does exist, how broken it is. It's okay to say that it's broken, because now there are solutions. Those solutions are digestible, cost-effective, and better, and just move that into the new default of construction methodology.
I think it has to be an improved ease of use, whether it's using the instrument, processing the data, or even the ease of use of the end user. Are they gonna, how quickly are they gonna access and adhere to that data? I think that's gonna be a huge driving force.
Yeah, I agree. It's not any one particular group within the industry, because we talked about it a little bit earlier. The manufacturers need feedback on how we're using their tools.
Yep.
Owners need consultant time for to raise their awareness about what they're specifying. We need to stay up to speed on best practices and what everybody's doing and keep up with competition.
That is so exhausting.
Everything is sort of connected, and it comes down to things like ease of use and the ability to consume the information and awareness around what we can gain, how we can gain value out of this stuff.
And we know consumption's only going up. I mean, you look at the truck driver shortage is going on right now. So in the laser scanning, it's similar. Consumption's so far up that I think ease of use is only going to contribute to its adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Last one. For Scan-to-BIM, how much are you seeing more of Scan-to-Model versus Scan-to-BIM?
Clarify the question.
That's going to get us to dive into the definition of BIM.
Well, I mean,
what
because
do
you
you mean
think
by
of scan to an object that has zero data behind it, that's not BIM. That's not BIM process, right? If I scan to BIM, I'm expecting data, information included with that object to get turned over to somebody else to utilize.
Yes. A BIM without the eye is just
That
a BM.
definitely gets into the nuances. So,
That's really funny.
My first thought was, well, a model could include a mesh, right? So that would be sort of like a dumb model. It's just it's surfaces. But what we've done, and so I talked about the big projects. We do a lot of small projects too, a lot of them, and we've had a challenge with figuring out how to implement VDC, implement laser scanning. On small projects that are very quick. We don't have existing conditions, or we don't have the time, we don't have the budget, et cetera, and we've had to be a lot more surgical, I like to call it, with those specific projects. And one of the things that's really helped us out is, instead of going to a BIM, we would go to more of a model, a 3D mesh type of situation, where now, instead of just taking my whole point cloud or spending hours upon hours, even if it's semi-automated, creating a model. Now we can take and create a mesh and layer our mesh so that I know that I have my fire protection separated from my steel, or I have the demo stuff that's going to be pulled out. I can pull that out, and I can use this for coordination in a more visual way, similar to the way you talked about it, actually. So seen a lot more use of that and a lot more value in not going all the way to a Revit model, but getting to something that is very usable a lot quicker. It's a little dumber, doesn't have as much data behind it, but it does the job for those types of projects.
Well, that's a good way to break it up in phases, because initially you don't necessarily need the level of information that you would need, in early conceptual versus later on in the project. It's like when you're going to actual field construction, that eye really matters. And then, when we're just trying to mass or like, modify an existing structure and then having the dumb model.
I think it matters, what object you're talking about. If it's store layout, can I just use the model data from, the existing stuff that's in this store that's already open? Or am I needing to pull parametric data? Is my client under certain constraints that I need to use their refrigerated cases or ovens and things like that? Then it's efficient for me just to replace that. But I'd like to know your thoughts on what we can use from the scan data itself.
I know, it's a very leading question. What are your thoughts? Join the
Parametric
panel.
data, yeah.
Well, I think part of it is in my world, you don't always have to go scan to model, scan to BIM.
Right.
Right? I think it comes down to what is the end result, what's the contract tied to, what does the owner want, blah, 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 right? Where do I need to take the scan data of this refrigeration unit and actually turn it into a model entity that has data behind it because now I need to extract something from it? Or do I need it just for a reference? Maybe I don't need to model it.
And maybe maybe that changes as the different phases of the project even goes.
Yeah, right. Like Lindsay said. Yeah, I think, I'm a huge BIM snob.
Shocker.
Yeah, shocker. But at the end of the day, like the dumbest possible thing you could do as a business is take a project and, scan it and then create a BIM if you don't need the BIM. Like that's just burning money. Why in the heck would you do that? So I think it always comes down to what's the end use. And if you just need something for coordination and a mesh is good enough because you can, you can layer it, then
You can clash with them,
you
too.
can clash it, then that's the best possible thing to do.
You can clash with a point cloud, but it's not going to be fun.
Yeah. So it's like, you do what makes sense for the project, right? So whether that's scan to model, scan to BIM, scan to CAD. I know people that have a huge business laser scanning things just to turn out 2D CAD plans.
We have clients we do that
Yeah.
quite a bit with.
Yeah, and it works great, so.
Yeah,
All right, Matt.
I would say one thing is, like we talk about with the different hardware options, you use different scanners for different reasons. I think the software we use and the actual deliverable we create, it's all the same discussion. It's, what is the client, what's their use case, what's the level of detail they need, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all to any of those approaches, because if you go do a hospital project that's doing above-ceiling scanning and they want a certain amount of detail with hangers, that's going to be different from an open warehouse or a house or a... So it even is still a challenge in the Scan-to-BIM world and the deliverable creation world is what's the software they're using? Am I giving the structural to a guy in Tekla? Is it going to Revit? And then that's just the building side of things. Then you have the industrial side, like Duke is doing, and we've done in oil and gas. That's not even, is that BIM? How are you defining that? What software is being used for? So there's so many pieces and so many industries and so many applications that aren't fully being adopted that I think we're just going to continue to have to educate and figure out those best
We level up
workflows
constantly.
and ways to merge.
Every project that we do, it's like, oh, yep, we're going to add this layer, we're going to add that layer. But I do think if you're getting into the scan game, it's important to understand what the model game is so that you're setting your scans up to be useful for a building information model or whomever's on the other side of that scan. You just need to know enough about their workflow so that you're responsible in the way that you're setting up your project.
Alrighty, thank you guys very much. Thanks for the panel.